Okay, welcome. I'm Rich Lyons, Dean of Berkeley's Haas School of Business. I want to welcome everybody here to this Dean Speaker Series. It is, as you know, our highest level speaker series, and we also are welcoming a number of alums and students virtually, and we'll have room for Q&A coming in from them as well. Today's event, Dean Speaker Series, is co-hosted by our Center for Responsible Business and also BERC, the Berkeley Energy and Resources Collaborative, the student organization BERC. For those not familiar with our CRB, our Center for Responsible Business, let me just say a couple of words about it. It is what we like to call an action tank. It is really very focused on bringing students together, companies together, faculty together. How can we redefine the future? How can we create a more sustainable future? These are fundamental elements of our CRB, and most of you are familiar with it. It's one of our most active centers here at the school. It's proudly celebrating its 10th year anniversary this year. The CRB Speaker Series, like this one, the Dean Speaker Series, focuses on bringing in speakers who embody our defining principles, our 4 defining principles, in the way they do their work and in the way they lead their organizations. This year, this semester, CRB has chosen to focus on one of those 4 defining principles of Berkeley Haas, and that is question the status quo. That's as fundamental as any of the 4, and of course that's a very Berkeley habit of mind. We're all very familiar with it, and they are quite focused on thinking about how that connects to the topics they go after. Today's speaker, Mark Tercek, is a perfect example of somebody who questions the status quo in so much of what he does. He is, as you know, president and CEO of the Nature Conservancy. This is the world's largest conservation organization. He's also the co-author of a best-selling book. I suspect many of you have read it or at least seen it, Nature's Fortune, How Business and Society Thrive by Investing in Nature. Before the Nature Conservancy, he was a partner and managing director at Goldman Sachs. He was at Goldman for 24 years prior to TNC. At Goldman, he managed several of the firm's key units in a lot of different areas. He was really a very rangy player at Goldman Sachs. And I must say, while I was at Goldman Sachs, he was a tremendous friend and really coach and mentor to me. So I want to thank him for that personally. In 2005, after those 2 decades as an investment banker, he was tapped within the firm at Goldman Sachs to develop the firm's environmental strategy and to lead its environmental markets group. So this was an evolution of his own profile within the firm, moving more and more toward an area of great purpose in his life. Inspired by the opportunity to help businesses, governments, and environmental organizations to work together in new ways, it was 2008 that he left to take the CEO role at the Nature Conservancy, TNC. TNC is known for questioning the assumption that business and environmental interests must always be at opposite sides of the table. You're familiar with that. Instead, it recognizes that working together, collaboration, is really essential to making the changes that we need to make as a world, as a society. By championing the idea that environmental stewardship is also good for business, they are able to create partners, really deep partners in the public, private, and civic sectors. And those partnerships span a lot of different projects. He may talk a little bit about it. Without further ado, let me welcome and thank Mark Tercek for being here. Mark, thank you.
Thanks, Rick.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. It's nice of you to come. And Rich, thanks for that nice introduction. I'm happy to be here. I'll try to talk for not too long so we can address your questions or what's on your mind. Anyway, you heard Rich's introduction of me. I worked at Goldman Sachs for 24 years, and then I joined the Nature Conservancy May 2008. And I, of course, thought, what better place to hire the head of the Nature Conservancy than good old Goldman Sachs? But I learned when I started in the job that that's not how everybody saw it, including a lot of environmentalists. And I remember one episode or event in particular. It was in my early days at the Nature Conservancy. And I was at this big event in D.C. where many of the important people in kind of our space were there. So my counterparts, the CEOs of the other big environmental organizations, were all there. The congressmen and congresswomen or senators who care a lot about our issues were there. The cabinet had some representatives. And then the big foundations were there, who were really important to us, the funders of our work. So I'm kind of like shuffling around, feeling a little bit intimidated. And I see one older gentleman in particular who really stands out. He was old, but fit as a fiddle, as they say, all dressed up. And I could see people who were treating him with great respect. And it dawned on me, it must be Russell Train. And you won't all know who Russell Train is, and he passed away about a year and a half ago in his 90s. But Russell Train was one of the giants of the environmental field. It's amazing what he accomplished in his long, productive life. He was the founder of WWF, a founder of the Conservation Fund, the first chairman of the President's Council on Environmental Quality, the second head of the EPA. I really could go on and on and on. He was a giant. That's why everyone was being so deferential. So I thought, as the new guy, I should go introduce myself. So I go over to Russell Train and introduce myself. He asked me, like, who are you? How did you get here? I explained some of my bio. And then he literally steps back like this, looks me up and down. Then he was a shorter man. He comes up right into my face, looks me right in the eye, and he says, kind of gruffly, but not unkindly, I don't think, "How the hell did you get from Wall Street to leading the Nature Conservancy?" And I sort of fumbled for an answer, but anyway, I'm going to tell you now what I should have said to Russell Train. What I should have said, if I were a little quicker on my feet, was all of us environmentalists should have great respect for what environmental organizations are accomplishing all around the world. I was a big fan of the environmental nonprofits when I was a Goldman banker. I'm a big fan, obviously, of the Nature Conservancy. I'm not here today to tell you all about the Nature Conservancy. But if we can do that on another occasion, it's a hell of an organization. Extraordinary, really. 4,000 people doing incredible work all around the world, sponsored and supported by incredible volunteer leaders and passionate donors. Amazing. And TNC is just one of many great environmental organizations. But what I should have said to Russell Train, number one, was environmental organizations, as good as they are, need to be open to new approaches, new ways of doing business, and indeed, even new leadership. That's the first thing I should have said. Second thing I should have said is, in particular, we need strategies that will get more people on our side, more financial resources on our side, and maybe most importantly, allow for a better, healthier dialogue between environmentalists and everybody else. So let me tell you a little bit about those things, and then I'll give you one or two examples of what I mean, and then we'll do questions and answers, okay? So part one, why should environmentalists be open to new ideas? So again, I think environmental organizations are extraordinary. I really now know them all very, very well. The ones I know, and I know most of them, they're all worthy. If you happen to support any of them, they deserve your support. These are great organizations. But we have to be honest, we environmentalists. And we claim to be science-based, so we have to look at the facts. And the facts are we're not really getting the job done. You could say about TNC and others, we're winning lots of battles, but we're kind of losing the war. Why do I say that? Because the things we care about at TNC, they're very easy to track, and we track them. So I'm thinking about things like the things we'd like to see more of are healthy forests, healthy coral reefs, fish stocks, and grasslands, biodiversity itself. I could go on and on. All of those things are in sharp decline. Or we could think about things we'd like to see less of, like greenhouse gas emissions. And again, notwithstanding everybody's good efforts, we set record levels of greenhouse gas emissions every year across the world. And then when we look ahead, it's not encouraging, really, because our work will only become more challenging. Today, there's something like 7 billion people in the world, and by 2050, there'll likely be at least 9 billion, maybe more. So there's going to be more people. Even more significant for an environmentalist, billions of people an even greater number of people will be rising out of poverty and entering the middle class. I think that's a good thing, personally. It's not just something nice to say. That means people will have better roofs over their head, better access to energy, better education for their children, better food and nutrition and health. But as people enter the middle class, they'll consume more, and that will mean need for more infrastructure of all types around the world. It will mean demand for food, space, energy, water, and all of that will quite significantly challenge us on the environmental front. And then if that's not enough on the challenge front, we also have to factor in on top of that climate change, how a changing climate will impact the environmental issues we care about. So for those reasons, that's why I say environmentalists, we should all be very humble. Any environmentalist who comes here and tells you he knows exactly, he or she, they know exactly what will work, it's just kind of silly because, again, we're not getting the job done. We have to do more. So part one of my answer to Russell Train should have been, Environmental organizations should be open to new kinds of strategies and ways of doing business, and that probably means sometimes new leaders, and that's why the Nature Conservancy was interested in me. I'm just the fortunate person who got to get the job, because we need to be open to new approaches. Our work's not getting any easier. Then, okay, so what might my idea be? And it's not the only thing we do at the Nature Conservancy, but this is what I wrote my book about with my co-author, Jonathan Adams. And it's not so surprising, right, that a former investment banker would talk about saving nature as an investment opportunity. And so the notion is, and I'll give you a couple of examples later, and the book is chock full of them. The notion is, environmentalists like me, even including me, we want to protect nature because we think it's just the right thing to do. We think it's a moral imperative. We owe our children and our grandchildren a natural world that's as healthy as the one we enjoyed. Period, full stop. We love nature. And that's the ethic of most environmentalists. That's the ethic of our passionate supporters. And we love our passionate supporters. They're great. But there aren't enough of them. And the rest of the world, when they hear us talk about nature that way, I think what happens sometimes is they make the mistake then. They say, oh, I see, nature is like a luxury good. If you're really rich or times are very good, then with some extra resources you can worry about taking care of nature. But if you're poor, so if you're a poorer country, or if times are hard, then worrying about nature should be a much lower priority. I think that's, in fact, exactly wrong. And so in my book, I argue if instead we think of nature as an investment opportunity, a couple of good things happen. And indeed, we'll get more people, more money, and a healthier dialogue. So by investing in nature, I mean, think of all the infrastructure around the world, and we can call that gray infrastructure. Roads and highways, equipment to provide all sorts of services that humankind depends on. Infrastructure, gray infrastructure. Well, it's my view that we can think of nature as an infrastructure too. Green infrastructure, or natural capital. And this is not a new idea. I'll come to what's new later. But the notion is that natural capital produces, obviously, very vitally important services for humankind. Clean air to breathe, water to drink, food to eat, protection from storms and floods, a topsoil to grow our food, a stable climate. These are all services that we derive from nature. And in my view, we can invest in nature to protect them and get more of them. And, importantly, it's often a better deal to invest in nature than man-made equipment. And if we can find more opportunities to demonstrate that, I think we can get more people on our side, have more financial resources, and a healthier dialogue. So that's sort of the pitch of my book, okay? So now let me just go right to examples, okay? And there's so many now I can pick from. I'll start with the water fund, because I think this will help you understand what I'm talking about. So right around the time I joined the Nature Conservancy, now almost 6 years ago, I learned of this little project we were doing in Quito, Ecuador. Quito is the capital city of Ecuador. It's a fast-growing city, and so the municipal water company was concerned about whether they would have, the citizens of Quito would have sufficient clean water as their city was growing. And so they were about to build or invest in significant amounts of additional plant and equipment to clean water. So a classic investment in gray infrastructure, plant and equipment, to get a very clear return, healthy water supply. So our local team showed up and knocked on the door of the water company and made a really smart argument, but it was a business argument or an economic argument. They did not make an environmental argument. They said to the water company, you can save money. We have a way for you to save money. If instead of building that plant and equipment, you invest upstream in protecting your watershed, that will be a lower cost way to get the water you need. Not only will it be a lower cost way to get the water you need, there'll be a lot of environmental benefits, community benefits, et cetera. But those issues were put aside for a minute. So the water company said, to their credit, that's kind of interesting. We'd be up for trying it. So TNC raised a very little bit of money, and the water company contributed a little bit of money. And we went upstream, and we do know how to do this. We went upstream and worked with communities of farmers and ranchers. This will only work if it works for them. And so we worked with those communities, and the kinds of things we did is we put up fences to keep cattle out of the river. We did plantings along the river shore to prevent sedimentation, dirt falling in the river. Better ditches to prevent fertilizer from running into the rivers. Nothing really that fancy, and stuff we did know how to do. And we were able to persuade these local communities that it was in their interest to do it too. It seemed to work. So then the Coca-Cola bottler and the brewer in Quito contributed a little bit more money. And it seemed to work even better because we had more resources now, we could do more. And so then the water company got permission from the regulatory authorities to charge everyone a fee in their water bill for conservation. Now, the plant equipment that they were going to build in the first place would be even more expensive. So the water users were going to get a bill one way or another. They were going to get a bigger bill if the plant equipment had been built. In this case, they got a smaller bill for this upstream conservation. And that's around when I showed up, and so my training was in finance. I said, wow, this is too good to be true. You have now, once you get this thing started, if you don't screw it up, it's conservation that pays for itself. It should go in perpetuity. And so with my financial orientation, I got quite interested in this project. But it was even better than that, I came to understand. Now, by the way, the upstream watershed area of Quito is the Bio-Condor Reserve of Ecuador. So conservationists like us, we would have wanted to protect that in any case. And so the old model would have been we would have come to Quito and kind of lectured people or embarrassed people or criticized folks for not taking better care of this habitat. That's what we would have called it too, habitat. And probably we would have found some folks to support us. But in Quito, frankly, we probably would have had a hard time generating the support to protect habitat for biodiversity purposes. But when it was reframed as an opportunity to save money and protect your watershed, we got the resources we need. But we got other things. So I said, we need people, right? Okay, so there you have it. We weren't lecturing anyone or criticizing anyone. Rather, the Nature Conservancy and other partners, we rolled up our sleeves and listened carefully to what the society wanted, in this case, clean water. And then together, we collaboratively figured out how to do that. So we have more people on our side. We have financial resources. And we have this healthy dialogue. And I said, boy, we should, however, it was small. It was a one-off. So we said, well, big deal. It's just one nice story. So we said, let's see if we can replicate it. So then we raised $5 million, which sounds like a lot of money, but by the standards of what is invested by environmental organizations is small. So we raised $5 million. The Inter-American Development Bank, kind of a World Bank for Latin America, I'm sure some of you know it well, they put up $5 million sourced from the Global Environmental Facility, the GEF. And then FEMSA, the dominant Coke franchisor across Latin America, their foundation put up $5 million. Because Coke clearly understands it makes sense to protect watersheds, right? So now we had $15 million to work. It's been an incredible investment fund. You can think about it like early stage venture capital. We now have 25 of these water funds operating across Latin America, but we have like 10 more coming. So soon there'll be 35 of these water funds. They're each a little bit different, but they have the common elements of users of water paying for upstream conservation. For example, another one is in Colombia. I was there recently. Our partners in this case are Colombian sugarcane growers. So I'd never met Colombian sugarcane growers before. They're nice, practical, agricultural people. They're not tree huggers. They don't look like tree huggers. They don't talk like tree huggers. But they know they need to protect their water supply. And they're interested in doing it on the most economic basis. They've turned out to be great partners. So we have now already 25 of these water funds. If you add up the populations benefiting from this water supply, it's like 50 million people. So now we're getting to scale. Because remember, we have to, somehow environmentalists have to get more done. But you still might say, but that's 25 kind of small projects. And I would say that's true. But now we're talking to the water authorities of Sao Paulo about their annual budget for investing in water infrastructure. So Sao Paulo, cities don't become any bigger or boom any more than Sao Paulo. And guess what, where Sao Paulo's watershed is? It's the Atlantic Forest. I didn't know much about the Atlantic Forest before I joined the Nature Conservancy. But as soon as I joined, I kept hearing about it, because the Atlantic Forest, it turns out, was once one of our hemisphere's great forests, and it's been sadly degraded. And if you should ever fly from Rio to Sao Paulo, which I did, I've done a lot now, and you look out the window, you'll see the Atlantic Forest, and you'll get it. Big mountainous region with a forest that looks like it's in very bad shape. But that's Sao Paulo's watershed. So now we're working with the authorities of Sao Paulo. And we have more work to do. We don't have all the answers yet. But the hypothesis is you can probably save money by shifting some of your very large annual budget in plant and equipment to restoring the Atlantic Forest. And by restoring the Atlantic Forest, you'll be, at a lower cost way, securing the clean water you need, but you'll also be, importantly, restoring the Atlantic forests. So you have biodiversity benefits, carbon sequestration benefits, recreation and spiritual benefits, you name it. And then I start getting excited because my job is to figure out how TNC can scale things up. And there you see, so that's my example, my first example of investing in nature. It's practical-minded. It's solving problems in a precise, business-like way. It's grounded in science. It has to be. And I will acknowledge we have more work to do on the science front, but we're doing it in partnership with a bunch of universities. And we have business people and government officials shifting dollars from plant and equipment to investments in nature, not because they're nice or they want to be environmental good guys, but because it's a better economic deal. All the environmental benefits are extras, free. And that's what I get excited about. And in my book, we don't have time for this, and it would be boring for you. But in my book, I have example after example of this in fisheries, in big ag, in urban situations. That's why I get so excited. I don't, though, claim it addresses every single environmental challenge we face. It doesn't. But I think it addresses a lot. And we get these outcomes that I think are so important. More people on our side, more financial resources, better dialogue. I'm going to give you one more example because it's kind of in the spirit of full disclosure. And I think it's interesting, and it's relevant for a business school. And that's some work we're doing with Dow Chemical. I don't know, a couple of years into the job, I was giving a talk like this about the benefits of investing in nature and natural capital. And the people from Dow heard me. And finally, Andrew Liveris, who's the CEO of Dow, but not somebody I knew in my prior life, he approached me and with a challenge. He said, if it's true, it was a challenge to TNC. If it's true that society and business benefit from investing in nature, but they don't know that fully, it must be true for Dow. So why don't we do a partnership together, Dow Chemical and TNC, to determine to what degree Dow depends on natural capital or green infrastructure. If Dow is depending on natural capital, what its value is, because you know how accounting works. That capital doesn't show up on your balance sheet. And if they're depending on natural capital, determine if it's vulnerable, and it is, it's always vulnerable, what Dow might do about it. So we announced this project, rather loudly, I guess, because we understand that Dow Chemical can be viewed pretty controversially by some people. And then the first wave of responses from even my friends, Mark, have you lost your mind? Why would you ever work with Dow Chemical? Are you aware of Dow's footprint, their history, et cetera? And my answer, and I don't think I'm not, Goldman Sachs people get called lots of things, but nobody ever calls them naive. I don't think I was naive. I said, yeah, that's right, exactly. That's why we want to work with the Dow Chemicals of the world, because if we can show a Dow Chemical that it makes business sense, not philanthropic sense or corporate social responsibility sense, we're for that too, but it makes business sense to be wiser stewards of nature, that could be an exciting breakthrough. So that was the first wave of reaction, and that was our response. And we pledged to the world, we're going to be super transparent here, because again, I don't know that this will work, and maybe Dow will be a bad partner. They've been a great partner so far. And so we'll disclose everything we do every step of the way. And all of you critics or people who care, pay close attention. If you think we're missing something or you have better ideas, tell us, because we just want to do our job better. We don't have any ulterior motive. So that was part one. Then the next wave of criticism was from academics. A lot of my good friends, they said, Mark, this isn't even a new idea. We academics have been writing papers about natural capital for so long, which is true. And when I wrote my book, I was very careful to acknowledge that. But I didn't even realize how, though true, the following was. How different it is from reading an academic paper about natural capital to actually working with business people to make the project happen. So anyway, that's the backdrop. So now it's time to start the project. And is Michelle Lipinski here? Yeah, here's my colleague Michelle Lipinski's here. And she's been quite engaged, especially at the beginning. So we start the project, and so we're not stupid. We said we better send a good team down to. So we decided to begin our project in Texas, Freeport, Texas, where Dow's biggest plant. It's one of the biggest plants anywhere in the world. It's Dow's biggest plant, right in the Gulf. So we decided let's start there because you got to start somewhere. And so we sent a team of pretty carefully selected TNC colleagues who we thought would be very good at this project. And then Andrew Liveris, likewise, picked a pretty good team of Dow engineers because we wanted this to work. So they all go to Freeport, Texas to brainstorm for a few days. And then I check in with our team, when they come back, say, hey, how'd the project go? And these are the kinds of things I hear from my scientists. Mark, I don't know if I want to work on this Dow project. Those business people, they don't think like we do. Some of the engineers even seemed uncertain about climate change, and this doesn't look like it's going to be very worthwhile. So, ooh, doesn't sound very good. So then I call Andrew Liveris up, and he says, oh, Mark, doesn't sound like you had a very good meeting. My engineers say your scientists are kind of arrogant. They don't care about the realities of business. They don't care about our need to be quite precise in our investment decisions, et cetera. And that's when a little light bulb went off for me, because I'll admit I kind of had my view of this project was sort of mighty TNC would come down off of the mountaintop and show Dow the enlightened path forward. But it's so different than that. We learn at least as much from Dow as they do from us. That's the beauty of these collaborations. And that's where those academic critics were missing a little bit, because it doesn't matter if academics write papers for academics. I mean, it matters. We need that intellectual work. And then it's good no, and then it's also good. Well, no, you business school folks are different. I mean, it's also good that I wasn't even meant to be comedic, that line. Yeah. No, but then it was good too that environmentalists like us were reading the white papers carefully and paying close attention. But we were forgetting about that next, I think, actually much more important stage. Like, now let's get things to happen on this basis, and that requires mixing it up and learning from one another and being quite humble and understanding lots of things. Not only can they go wrong, they will go wrong. And that's what our critics have to understand. You got to take some chances if you want to make some progress in life. So now I'm almost done. But what happened in the project? So we went into the project, of course, with some hypotheses. So one of our hypotheses was, boy, Dow's plant is right there at the Gulf. And of course, they must have noticed that there's sea level rising, and we have more episodes of extreme weather. So our scientists said to the Dow engineers, are you concerned about sea level rise and extreme weather? And they said, of course we are. And so then our scientists said, what are you going to do about that? And they said, oh, we're going to build seawalls. You know, we know how to do this. And it turns out those Dow engineers, they know everything there is to know about seawalls. They know what they'll do, what they won't do, what they cost, what the risks are, how they'll depreciate over time. They should know too, right? They're engineers, and protecting this plant is a big deal. And so we then said, oh, we have a better idea, we think. And so just like we did in Quito. And so the scientists said, great, what's your better idea? And we said, we think if you invest in restoring coastal ecosystems, that will cost less, it will provide even more robust protection from storms, and you'll get all these extra co-benefits. And so the engineers said, that sounds great. Show us the data. And we said, oh, data? How about this white paper? And they said, no, we don't make investment decisions on white papers. We build out, as you business school students know, we build cash flow statements, and we have to have probabilities for the different risks. We can't invest in coastal ecosystems and have a big storm come along and blow those ecosystems away and lose our plant. And so that's when the learning started for TNC. So now, I mean, I'm really quite proud of this. But it's early days. It doesn't mean we'll be right. But now you have TNC scientists and Dow engineers submitting jointly authored papers to peer-reviewed journals on what we're learning. Even that was interesting, because some of my colleagues said, but what if we learn, Mark, that the seawalls are a better deal? I said, well, if that's true, we better know it. And so it's no longer white papers. It's no longer environmentalists just talking to environmentalists in a comfortable way. There's no fact vilifying or blaming anyone for anything. Rather, we're trying to solve problems. To me, it's very exciting. Another example from Dow, and then I think I will stop. Because you learn stuff, too. That's the other beauty of mixing it up. You just learn stuff you wouldn't know. And so it turns out now our scientists are hanging around with the engineers and getting along quite well. Although we had to change our team a little bit. Everybody wasn't getting along with everyone. And so then our scientists learned that this Dow plant, because it's growing, it's still being expanded, even though it's huge, to deal with local ozone issues, which are a big health deal in America. To deal with local ozone issues, they're about to be required to put in a whole bunch of new scrubbers in their chimneys. I'm not an expert here, but my scientists have walked me through this a few times, so I think this is right. Anyway, it's hard for anyone to get excited about a scrubber, right? It's just like it's in the chimney. You don't even know it's there. But it can deal with ozone issues. So now our scientists had a good example. They said, we think local reforestation, big-time reforestation, will also address those local ozone issues. probably costs less, and obviously, again, lots of co-benefits. In fact, because of the way wind patterns flow, some of the reforestation could occur in Houston. And Houston's a perfectly fine city, but let's face it, it could use some more trees. So Dow engineers and TNC scientists are now working with the EPA to see whether, as an alternative to the scrubbers, reforestation will work. And the EPA is quite encouraging. I mean, they're not stupid. They know this would be cool. Now, we're not done yet. And it obviously has to work because the health issues from ozone are real. But imagine if it works. It won't just work there. It can work in many places. And you have a new opportunity to invest in nature, have reforestation. Who could be against it? By the way, reforestation in places like Houston, if the climate changes the way we expect it will, can provide all sorts of benefits for Houston, including lowering the temperature and cleaning the air. And so another example of investing in nature. And again, you'll see more people on our side, this time business people like the folks who run Dow, financial resources. We're not the cost of doing this kind of work is just manpower. We're not that expensive. And then the opportunity will be to save money by making alternative investments in different ways. And you see a healthier dialogue. So if I had been a little quicker on my feet to wrap up, that's what I should have said to Mr. Train. I should have said, why am I at TNC? Because our board did something that was a little bit courageous, take a chance on me, and we'll see whether that proves to be a good bet. But they deserve credit for trying because they understood it was time to be open to new approaches. If it comes with some criticism, and it does, listen to the critics because they might be right. Disclose everything you need to disclose, but try new things to see if you can scale up our ability to save nature before it's too late. But the other thing I would have said to Russell Train was, but don't panic when you hear me say that, because we environmentalists broadly, and we environmentalists at TNC, and me, we believe in protecting nature because we love nature and we think it's the right thing to do. That's our principal driver. But these kinds of strategies, not enough people feel that way in our view, and so this is additive to that. We do a lot. We do a tremendous amount the old-fashioned way. People give us money. We go protect beautiful places. There's nothing wrong with that. We love that work. But we can't get enough of it done fast enough all around the world to meet our goals. These are alternative strategies that can let us do more. So now, with that, let me stop. And I'd be happy to take any questions or challenges or hear what's on your mind. Thank you very much.
That was great, Mark. Thank you. And as usual, we are creating a video, so please use the microphones. If you have a question, you can just step up and also line up behind the mics. Thanks very much.
I was going to say don't be shy, but obviously I don't have to say that at Berkeley. I probably should be shy. Yes?
So what investments in natural capital do you see as holding the greatest potential to remove carbon from our atmosphere to a more sustainable level?
We know. We know the answer, saving the world's rainforests. I thought when I joined TNC, I write this in the book. I wrote a couple of paragraphs about it. Everybody kept advising me to make it personal. But when I joined TNC, I thought we would have, shortly after the time I joined, a cap-and-trade program. And by the way, I got quite involved in that, the pursuit of that, and we got incredibly close. I think history will say, maybe President Obama should have put climate before health care. Who knows? Historians can decide that. We got very close. Had that cap-and-trade program passed, wasn't a perfect bill, but they're all imperfect. It would have regulated entities in the U.S. would have had three ways to reduce their emissions. They could just reduce their emissions. They could buy permits from entities who had more than they needed, or they could do so-called offsets by paying to protect rainforests around the world. And TNC continues to do a tremendous amount of work here. It's complex, for sure. There's risks. But I'm quite convinced, and there's a whole body of evidence that shows, there's no lower cost way to reduce emissions than saving standing rainforests. And then, of course, in the case of saving standing rainforests, there's no better example of co-benefits, biodiversity, you name it. And I'm thinking about places like the Amazon, where, in fact, progress is quite good. Indonesia, we're working in each of these places really hard. Indonesia, where progress is really bad. Mexico, where it's somewhere in between. But we know it would work. Now, we don't have any comprehensive climate legislation, though, in the U.S. And then because we don't have it in the U.S., we don't have it in many other places, although we do have it in California. It's just getting underway, as you know. And California does have room for these forest offsets. So I think we know exactly what to do, but it would require... We have a whole bunch of voluntary stuff that's that's going well, too. That's where our evidence comes from. But it requires comprehensive climate and energy legislation that will mandate reductions in emissions. By the way, one other thing I should say, because sometimes people hear me talk about our volunteer initiatives with the private sector, and they say, oh, great, we can, the hell with the government, we don't need them. No, we need the government. We need the government more than we need these voluntary initiatives, and this would be one great example.
The back
Yes.
mic, please. Yeah, the back one is the next. Yeah.
Hi.
Hi, thanks for coming. I really appreciate it. And I really love your success stories on market-based approaches, but you kind of partially answered the question. But where do you see, particularly working with corporate partners, where do you see the limit or the line between market-based approaches and when regulation should be the appropriate approach in terms of what's optimal?
Yeah, we need tons of regulation. So I'm glad you're asking about this. I mean, I'm kind of repeating myself, but the problem we have right now, we environmentalists, and me in particular, I had to move to D.C. for this job because I'm supposed to be on Capitol Hill achieving legislative breakthroughs, but it's not a very good time for that. And so, but we're fighting hard. We're fighting very hard. In fact, I think the Secretary of Interior is going to have some good news later this week. It's not hopeless. But so then we say, okay, what can we do in the meantime? So we think these voluntary initiatives with people like Dow are quite helpful because another thing happens in these partnerships. It's really encouraging for me, at least, and I'm thinking of Dow in particular. We get to know one another so well. We become much more sympathetic of their challenges and vice versa. And then we learn we have all these things in common we didn't know. So Dow, in connection with some pending water legislation, Dow is going to Capitol Hill with us. And it's a much more powerful way for me to advocate for. If I go by myself to Congress and say, here's why I'm for environmental reasons, they say, tell me something I don't know. You're an environmentalist. If I come along with Dow, who employs a lot of people in this congresswoman or senator's district, they pay close attention. So we really need better regulatory policy. The best example, of course, is in climate, but there are so many examples. I almost don't know where to start. But like in our work with fisheries, again, we think we're showing it's really hard to. We have a lot of environmentalists broadly, not only TNC. We have a lot of success fishery by fishery. And so we think we are showing you can invest in fisheries too, kind of create no-take zones that become fish factories, if you will, where fish spawn and grow, and then they spill out. And then you need to, at first we stop there, and then we say, oh, it didn't work, because they come out and then they all get devoured. So then when they come out, then we create kind of property rights in the fish, which is actually in the fishermen and fisherwomen's best interest. However, we just have these voluntary initiatives. And again, we need the government then to help us scale that up. So we need government here. We need it everywhere. I'm sure there are people here at the business school who are more expert in that than me. But my point is, we love our voluntary initiatives, but they are insufficient. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Following on your point that environmentalists need to be open to new ideas and leaders, what backgrounds and perspectives do you think, other than Wall Street, are still underrepresented?
Oh, man, it's a really good question. So many. We were talking about this a little bit right before I came with Rich and his colleagues. Take TNC, for example. I'm just, again, using TNC as it's the org I know best. So 4,000 colleagues, incredible people. Just, at Goldman Sachs, it embarrasses me now. We used to brag about hiring the best and the brightest, and we'd always brag about how hard we worked. Well, TNC, our best and brightest, are every bit as bright and best, and they work every bit as hard. Incredible people. But just because of the nature of the way our organization grew over time, you don't want to overgeneralize, but they have a lot in common. And if we're going to be successful going forward, we need to mix it up more. So we need people with backgrounds like mine. We need more financial minds for sure. But then, I told you in the keto thing, we have to go upstream and work with those local communities. It's easier to say than do. So we need anthropologists and social scientists. And then what else do we need? And then we have to, we environmentalists have done a horrible job of explaining our work. I mean, if you think about it, right? Who would be against nature, right? I mean, obviously, it ought to be a nonpartisan issue. We all depend on nature. Yet it's become this toxic partisan issue. So we need to be better diplomats and politicians and better communicators. I don't know where to stop, really. Then at TNC, there are great environmental organizations who have been focused on urban environments. We haven't been, but now we are, because the kinds of strategies that I'm excited about or that I'm talking about really apply well in cities. But now we need different kinds of colleagues. Final comment, I guess, is we need to be hugely more diverse, because the environmental business, in most respects, I'm generalizing, but certainly TNC, it has tended to be a movement of well-to-do people, not necessarily mega-rich, but well-to-do, white, good people. God bless these people. They've been passionate champions of environment, but the world's changed so much, and so we need to look more like the world we seek to serve. So that's all the good news. And then the environmental problems, I mean, Dow has really great people. Just one example. I've got a bunch of companies like this I can talk about, and they're hiring people to deal with all these issues with different kinds of skill sets too. And so then you might say, well, then do you have some good ideas on where I can get a job? It's sort of at that, it's not quite there yet. So if you want to work in our field, I think you have to be a little bit of an entrepreneur to find your niche. But almost every background, I think, applies. It's challenging for us. We have to really shift gears fast in terms of who works at organizations like ours and how we work together, and it's hard, to be honest. It's easy for me to say, here are all the things we want to do. I think they make sense. But then doing them all is hard, because we need to work differently with different kinds of people. Thanks. Yes, ma'am.
This is a subset of the communication problem. I'm curious about, there's the word sustainability, and there's triple bottom line, and there's natural capital, and there's hybrid capitalism. And it seems like, do you see any way that the environmental movement can unify and start kind of talking and messaging itself all in the same way? And then full disclosure, I worked in the Nature Conservancy for 30 years.
Oh, that's nice. Hang on.
So I'm responsible for part of the communication that worked in its context when it was where it was, because it used to be, there wasn't even Earth Day.
Yeah.
But now it seems like there's almost like so many bright people, and everybody has an app. And I mean, how do we unify so we spread out and we're able to reach ranchers and Dow Chemical and everybody?
Right. Well, so I mean, it's kind of a complicated question, of course. And I don't happen to be a communications expert and don't pretend to be. But first, I would say it's not bad right now. And TNC would be a good example. We work with all these diverse kinds of ranchers, indigenous people, Dow Chemicals, investment banks. I think we've done a good job. We're just one org of communicating the practical ways of saving nature. It doesn't always have to be a fight, blah, blah, blah. And then we have all these different organizations. There's kind of an ecosystem of environmental organizations. It can be a little bit hard for outsiders to understand, but that would be true of any field. I mean, take Silicon Valley. I was there yesterday. You're driving around. It's confusing to me. I don't know what all these companies do. But if you do the work, there's a reason they all exist. I think the environmental movement's kind of like that. And so in my book, I sing the praises of Greenpeace, which surprises people, but it doesn't surprise me. They're great. They're really great at what they do. And Greenpeace plus TNC is way better than TNC by itself. Then people say, yeah, but sometimes you need to all be on the same page. And all is huge, right? There are a lot of us. But we can do it. We did it in connection with that climate bill I talked about. We had so many disagreements about what the bill should look like. Of course, right? We had important ones and we had trivial ones. But not everybody, but fair enough. Some people didn't agree with us. But many of us got on the same page and fought for a single piece of legislation. We did the same thing in the Restore Act, so that the BP oil finds will be reinvested in restoring the Gulf ecosystem. And the environmentalists got together. And then some of those other things you asked about, like triple bottom line, hybrid capital. I mean, look, some of that stuff is sort of BS at this stage. We have work to do. It's too early. And environmentalists like to make that mistake. That's why I told you the Dow story the way I did. A lot of people said, no, this is boring. It's already been done. But that's not true. It hasn't been done. We have to do this work and make a lot more progress. And as we make that progress, so last year at Davos, it's fun in this job. I get to go to the World Economic Forum. It's really cool. And last year, Andrew Liver, CEO of Dow, and I did an event that wasn't even on the official program. It's a very robust program. Peter Voser, interestingly, the chairman at the time of Shell, CEO of Shell, hosted the event. It was come here, Mark and Andrew Liveris, talk about the Dow TNC project. Everyone we invited came. And they didn't come to see me, believe me. I might have been mildly interested in what's this guy have to say. But they were keenly interested in what Andrew Liveris would say. They wanted to know, is it true that you can work with someone like TNC, do something good for the environment, and improve your business at the same time? Because if so, we'll want to do that too. And that's how I think this stuff is going to scale. But we need evidence of success. Who's next? Hi.
I have a question. what does it take to replicate the beautiful examples you share with us today, but at a significantly faster pace? Because we just have a couple of them. And just linked to that question, you start by saying that we're sort of losing the battle. So could you share your long-term vision of when do you feel that we're going to start tipping that to the other side?
Yeah, okay, so the most important question to ask me, CEO, and this is what I always tell my board, this is where they should focus too. The most important question to ask is, okay, you have all these like cool ideas, and they seem pretty good. Right? If you look at these little anecdotes, you say, wow, it seems to work. How do you scale it up fast? So that's what modern-day environmentalists have to figure out. So I gave you one good answer. With the Dow stuff, we're publishing everything we do as we go, and we're telling everyone about it. And it's not to brag. It's because if our ideas are any good, we want business people to replicate them and emulate them. And I think that will happen. The water fund story, same thing. So now we have water funds in Africa. We kind of stole the idea from the U.S., but now it's getting momentum in the U.S. And we just and companies like look, I'm not saying companies are always perfect. They're not. They make lots of errors, and organizations like us have to really be careful. But companies like beverage companies, they're not stupid. They get if there are better ways to protect watersheds, they're for it. And so we're doing a lot of that stuff. There are all those questions about regs. We need that too. There's been a little bit of discussion about the need to better communicate. I think that's pretty important. So TNC is trying to do that. That is not my area of strength. But that is why I wrote the book. I thought at least maybe some people would read the book and see that there are these ideas out there. So those are the kinds of things. And then as for my view, of course I'm optimistic. I mean, you have to be optimistic. If you work at TNC, it's fun. You come to work every day. Maybe you wake up in the morning and you read a bad story about some environmental bad thing. Easy to do, right? It's there in the paper every day. So you're discouraged. Then you go to work and you get to start working on one of these projects, and you feel good because we really get stuff done. So it probably pushes us a little bit in the optimistic camp, maybe even more than it should. But that's good because that, as business school people, you'll get that. You can get more done in that optimistic can-do frame of mind. But why else am I optimistic? If I go to Davos now, it's quite encouraging, really. There's not a CEO at Davos who won't meet with me if I ask for a meeting, because they all know. These are the guys running, they're mostly guys, but they're not all guys. These are the people running the world's biggest companies, and they all know environmental issues aren't going away. We got to be smarter as business people. And that's true most places. It's not true right this minute at Capitol Hill. I think that will change. It's true in California, right? You see governments getting their act together. And then final reason for optimism is young kids. So like I have two boys in high school. They're not geniuses, I promise. They're like good boys. Maybe they pay a little more attention to this stuff now because I have my job. But I see in their science classes, their science teachers are really doing a very good job compared to the way mine taught me of they're learning normal science, but they're connecting it very nicely to real-world problems. And like my boys, they care about the environment. They are paying close attention, and I see that all over the place. So we got young people on our side. We've got business increasingly getting it. I think government's getting it. We know much more. We have far more knowledge than we used to. And then I guess the final reason for optimism, it's a dual-edged thing, but things like Hurricane Sandy, I'm an old New Yorker. I'm not going to take Hurricane Sandy lightly, a devastating storm. But you'll notice Governor Cuomo, Mayor Bloomberg, even Governor Christie, nobody was like challenging whether climate was changing or not. They said, well, Jesus, we got to get on with dealing with this stuff. So some of the bad news helps too. Yes. I have to wrap up pretty soon. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we've got maybe 3 more questions. We'll take is there a remote question waiting? Okay, so we'll take I'm sorry, just the next 2 in the back and then 1 remote question. That'll be the last 3. Sorry.
Curious about the examples you gave where you're talking about, the project needed to have some financial or economic or positive NPV to show your partner that you're working with. So I wanted to know in cases where that doesn't happen, for example, with the Dow case where maybe building the wall was cheaper or made more economic sense in the short term. How do you convince or how do you work with partners? Is it to take more, I guess, of a values perspective versus a business or economic perspective?
Okay, so I get the question. So it's important. So today I was talking to you about, and I wrote a book about those win-win opportunities because I think it's like really colossally foolish not to take advantage of those opportunities to the full extent. If there are instances where you can save money by protecting nature, I think we should do that to the maximum extent. But I agree, it doesn't address all problems and challenges, for sure. And even, by the way, that kind of work that I was talking about is a minority of TNC's work right now. Most of our work is still the more old-fashioned model. It's a great model. Kind people give us money. Sometimes companies give us money too, because companies do philanthropy, but not really that much. Good government leaders choose to do the right thing, and we protect nature because it's the right thing to do for recreational, spiritual purposes. Or we protect nature because people need it to be protected. I talk about in the book, I grew up in the city of Cleveland. My grandparents were immigrants from Eastern Europe, so my childhood was mostly spent working in our garden, and we had I grew up right in the city of Cleveland. We had peach trees, plum trees, cherry trees, apple trees. It's really remarkable. And I hated all that work. It's like, it's just work, work, work. Suddenly, everything died. And that was when the Cuyahoga River caught on fire. And like America woke up. President Nixon was our president. And in his regime, I think he was a little cynical about it. That's what historians tell us. Who cares? In that era, we created the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, the Endangered Species Act. We formed the EPA. I could go on and on. And so we can do the right thing when it is expensive. And that is at least as important, but probably even more important than what I was talking about in my speech. But the speech is a way to get more people on our side and more people engaged. And then there's crossover. I promise you this happens. In fact, I'm an example. I didn't grow up as a nature boy. There's crossover. You get interested in this win-win stuff as a business person, for example, and then you start paying more attention to nature, and then you fall in love with nature and want to do it because it's the right thing to do.
Thanks, Mike. How about the remote question now, please, Mike?
You've answered most of these questions. Here's one. It's a bit of a twist from Claudia Martinez in our evening and weekend program. As someone who believes the environment is a good investment, what is your view on the fiscal and resource management capabilities of the California State Parks Department?
Oh, I don't know enough. I'm sorry. I'm not expert. I have the general impression that you're, in my view at least, your elected officials do a pretty good job of trying to do the right thing, but I don't know the details. I think California's leadership in climate is really very important because we need leadership somewhere in the U.S., and so it's good to see some states doing it, and let's face it, California's a big one. And so we did get engaged. When you remember there was that campaign, we have a California chapter that could answer that question really well. But I remember, because at my level I got engaged, when there was that effort to do away with California's climate initiatives, we got engaged on the other side of that. But I'm not really an expert in the California regulatory thing.
Thanks.
Okay,
last question, please, sir.
Hi, my name is Zaki. So I'm from Indonesia. I spent the last 3 years working for the government of Indonesia, fighting deforestation there. So I went to Brau, to Kalimantan, so I applaud TNC for helping my government to fight deforestation. Because if we don't do anything in Indonesia, like in a 100 year, Indonesia will lose its forest. So I thank you for that. So I think it's not more of a question, but more like a suggestion. I agree with you that it's really important to involve the government. And what I feel really work in Indonesia is that we need to create public pressure to make sure that the government act on that. And there are two things that I learned there. The first thing is in such countries like Papua New Guinea, DRC, Central Africa, there's like big lack of data there. And if we want to go to the government, we need to come with data. And so I will suggest organizations like TNC to really help the government to build data, like the rate of deforestation. Every year, not every country has access to satellite images. That's how I convinced my government to work with Google to finally get the satellite images to monitor the forest. And the second thing is, once we get the data, it's a matter of public transparency. There's never been in my country, in Indonesia, that news about forests come up in the first page. And I really want to have news about the rate of deforestation is getting higher and higher to be there in the first page, so it can create public pressure. I saw this happen in Brazil when the people there celebrate when the deforestation reduced to 80% in 5 years. That's amazing, and it goes to the first page of newspaper there. And when there's an illegal logger, it's like it was shown on live television. So I really believe that if organizations like the NC can help, one, to build strong database for these countries, and two, push for public transparency, that will be really help to build the pressure for government to really help this effort?
I agree 100%. No, those are really wise comments, and I agree 100%. You should come work with us in Indonesia, by the way. And I should say though about Indonesia, we're encouraged. It is scary, right? The rate of deforestation is very high, but in Brazil it was scary, and we've made great progress doing the kinds of things you suggest, and it's getting more and more traction in Indonesia, and it's a reason to be cautiously encouraged. But there's a lot of work to do. But I agree with all those wise comments. Michelle, are you sticking around at all? Here's my colleague, Michelle. I apologize. It's going to be rude. I'm really going to run now to my car and go to the airport. But Michelle's here if any of you are interested in learning more. Thanks very much, Rich, for inviting me. This was really fun.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you very much.